Welcome to the fourth part of a series on Roman religions in the imperial period. This fourth part looks at the religions of the empire as opposed to the religions of Rome as a city, Rome as a grouping of estates within Italy, or Rome as a family life, a culture. This instead looks at the religions of the empire, things which came in outside of Rome and affected them. Now, first we covered in the third part that the gods of Rome really were expanded when the Romans met the Greeks. The Romans had very simple gods of Hares, of the major sky god, of the female response to it, either as Juno or Certes. But when they met the Greeks, they inherited their pantheon because why not another god? Make sure you find out how to placate those gods and be specific. That was in the mind of the Roman. So what we haven't really covered is mystery religions. And these religions came from the Far East, came from the Levant, and they had common features. The use of a planting cycle, sow, grow, reap, to represent life, death, rebirth as you sow again. The participants shared in the God cycle of life, defeating enemies, and rebirth, and they had secret ceremonies. You can see why the Romans looked at the Christians and said, life, death, resurrection. Doesn't this sound like a mystery religion? Well, let's go over the several mystery religions that were there. First, we have the cult of Demeter. And Demeter's daughter Persephone was captured by the god of the underworld, Hades. And the story goes that when Hades was confronted by Zeus, he agreed to let Persephone come up every so often to visit her mother, and that becomes the spring. And when she goes back down to Hades, that is the fall. Now, the rites of Demeter were the Eleusinian mysteries, and they were covered in Eleusis near Athens. And you find these first coming in about, well, it's probably about 493 BCE. Could be about plus or minus. Cicero suggests it's about that time. So they are a set of rebirth mysteries that came into Rome early. Dionysus and the Orphic mysteries began as the orgastic cult of Dionysus of wine and drinking, but they changed to salvation through personal purification and secret ceremonies. It was a dualist type of religion where the soul must be freed from the body's corrupting interfluence, and it might go through several incarnations. It originally came from Thrace, which is above Macedonia, and spread through the regions of Greece. The first indication that it came to Rome was in 186 BCE, but it was officially repressed, and you find this out of Livy. Now, the secret ceremonies in Greece were usually nocturnal, and the Romans were really concerned about these nightly activities having impact on the honor of the youth, so they repressed it pretty heavily. Isis was the goddess of heaven, earth, ski, and the underworld, and this comes from Egypt. She was assisted by her husband, Orisis, and he brought Orisis back to life after he was killed by his brother. Ptolemy altered this religion to put in Orisis with Seraphis, and that helped with the importation. It, as I mentioned, started in Egypt and spread through the Middle East. In Rome, in 59 BC, it was repressed, but you see Vespasian and Titus, who stayed at the temple. Vespasian, as he headed to become an emperor after the conquest of Jerusalem, and Titus, his son. The rituals emphasized on human immortality based on this life and bringing back. Again, you see the link to some things that the neighbors of the Thessalonians might have thought the Christians were doing. When you see this sort of contrast where the Christians in Thessalonica would have to explain why they're different than all of these, you can sort of capture how they must have felt. Sybil was the mother of gods and came from Anatolia. She's described as the great mother, the corn mother, or the mother goddess of all gods. Now Sybil drives her human lover Attis insane, and he castrates himself and dies. Her mourning introduces death into the world, and after his death, Sybil turns him into a tree which restarts life. You have the death, the rebirth. It originated in Phrygia in the modern Turkish area, but it was popular throughout the Roman Empire in the 1st century. It came to Rome in 500 BCE, but again, you're seeing some push and pull. Now, there's some really interesting rites, Tolarolim, where the initiates lay under a bull being sacrificed, having blood catching underneath, and they got blood on their face and drinking it. And the priests were eunuchs to sort of represent Attis's castrating himself. Mithras, the god Mithras, springs to life from a rock, battles the sun, and slays a bull. The slaying of the bull gives rise to the human race. Dualistic Mithras cult saw the human trapped between good and evil. The souls of the humans were 7 levels removed from home. And you may see that again in the philosophies, but these mystery religions were quite different than the philosophic, even though they shared some of the dualistic forms. This religion came out of Persia with changes in Syria, and it was also credited to Pompey's resettlement of Sicilian pirates in 70 BC. Plutarch notes that they exist in Rome in 100 CE. So you know that these things, oftentimes these might come in near the docks or near the low lyings in some of these, or as people came in from the farming area. The meals in the Mitra were shared reclining with 2 parallel bunches in an underground grotto viewing the picture of the god. The priests had 7 levels of initiation, and the Mithrite adherents were sworn to help others. Now notice that again you see some of the commonality where the neighbors of the Thessalonians are going to get confused. Underground grottos, as people might have in Rome, sworn to help each other. Now there were several gods of the Levant coming out of the river Orontes, which is north of Israel in Syria. And Odysseus was a god of vegetation, and he rises in Rome pretty late after 100 CE, coming in with some of the later emperors who came out of this region. The exact rites are unknown, although there were chants, livestock sacrifice, feasts, and dancing around the altar. Now something that is a mystery religion, not quite, is astrology. Tiberius, Nero, Arthur, Vespasian emperors had an astrologer. Demetrian and Hadrian could draw up a horoscope themselves, and Septus Severus had his astral horoscope painted on a wall. So the Romans were really diviners, but they saw that as no different as trying to manipulate the gods. Also, they used magic to constrain the gods and counter fatalism. Marcus Aurelius used it during his Genevian War. And magic may include necromancers who explained the bitterness of violent death, which was all too often a part of war or disease. The Roman law condemned the exercise, but some of the Eastern religions brought it in. The spells were done in wars or chariot spaces or to gain business. So you see, the Romans picked up a lot of the mystery religion, a lot of the things that were in the Far East. Now, there's one thing left in religions, and that's the imperial cult, the deification of the emperor, and we will cover that next in part 5. Thank you.